hope. Do we really need it? Here we are in the third Sunday of Advent, and the portion of the lectionary for our readings today is a passage that you probably wouldn't normally associate with Advent or Christmas. It's about John the Baptist once again. And it's a section that really doesn't even seem to be Christmas-like at all. We're used to magi and stars and shepherds and angels. But since it's about John the Baptist, there is a question that I have. I wonder when John went into town to get some new camel clothing at the prophet's warehouse, or decided to grab something to eat at the local insect eatery, I wonder how he responded when people asked him where he lived.
In a van down by the river.
That's about what I think too. You know, unfortunately, this season, Advent, Christmas, the holidays, is a season that's painful for a great many people. One of the guests who comes into Chick-fil-A on a regular basis also works at a mortuary here in town. And she told me that they've taken care of 7 suicides in the last 2 weeks, ages 22 to 45. Why? This is a season of love, joy, peace, and hope, isn't it? But it seems that during this particular time, there are so many people who are absent of hope. You see, people want hope. And today's section of the Christmas carol, O Holy Night, is a thrill of hope. The weary world rejoices. For yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. Last week we read about the message of John the Baptist, who announced that the light had indeed arrived, and that light was Jesus. John recognized Jesus. He identified him as Messiah at the river. We also know that even before John was born, that while he was still in his mother's womb, and Mary, the mother of Jesus, was still carrying Jesus, when they met, John, as an infant in utero, leapt in the womb when Jesus came near. Before he was even born, he was announcing, Jesus is here. The Messiah is here, with those little feet kicking inside of his mother. You see, today's message, today's lesson and passage is from Matthew chapter 11, starting with verse 1. And it's very different. No longer is John in the river. He's been arrested. He's imprisoned. Spoiler alert, John never makes it out of prison. He's arrested, he's put in prison, and he dies. He's executed. Maybe a precursor to the Messiah himself, Jesus. But let's start with Matthew chapter 11, verse 1, and read our passage for today. After Jesus had finished instructing his 12 disciples, he went on from there to teach and preach in the towns of Galilee. When John heard in prison what Christ was doing, he sent his disciples to ask him, "Are you the one who was to come, or should we expect someone else?" Jesus replied, "Go back and report to John what you hear and see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cured, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is preached to the poor. Blessed is the man who does not fall away on account of me." The question that John sent via his disciples to ask Jesus was, "Are you the one, or should we look for another?" This is asked by the one who pointed the Messiah out at the river and baptized him. This is being asked by the one who before he was born was kicking the womb when Jesus came near. How could John even think of such a question? Where is his faith, we might ask? You see, the point and the illustration here is something that all of us understand very well. Our situations in life change. And when our situation in life changes, it has a direct impact, whether we want to admit it or not. It has an impact on our faith. It has an impact on our questions. Now, we can romantically say, as Peter did, I'll never reject you, Lord, not me. But when the situation in life changes, so might our response. It doesn't mean that we don't love the Lord. It doesn't mean that we aren't going to be faithful, but it raises questions. Theological questions, practical questions, meaningful questions about who we are and what it means to be a follower. John's question to Jesus, sent by his disciples, or sent through his disciples to Jesus, is very real. Are you the one, or should we look for another? We look around in our world today with all of the sin and the violence and the destruction and the evil, everything that's going on. Do you not ever ask yourself that question? Does that never occur to you? Are you the one, or should we look for another? Is this real? Is it too fanciful to be real? My friends, we have to realize it doesn't mean that we're without faith. Immanuel Kant said that you have to make, when it comes to faith and reason, you have to make room for faith. You have to do that. Because sometimes faith and reason do not match up. And in fact, when our faith has to be backed up with logic and reason, it no longer really is faith, is it? Our situations in life sometimes can dim the light. I imagine that John the Baptist in his cell, the light got a little bit dimmer than it was when he was in the river. When all is well in your life, when your job situation is fine and you have received that raise, when your relationship is fine with your spouse, the light is very bright. But maybe when your spouse tells you they no longer want to be with you, the light gets a little dimmer. When the boss or the HR department hands you a slip or a notice with a layoff, or you're fired, the light gets a little dimmer. When you go to the doctor and you get the results of the test, maybe the light gets a little dimmer. Our situations in life change. Are you the one, or should we look for another? John asked. Notice Jesus' response, however. His response is not a rebuke. His response is not, John, you have little faith. His response is not, as he does speak to Peter later in Matthew's gospel and calling him Satan. It isn't anything like that. Jesus' response, his reply to John's question, is for his disciples to go back to John and tell him what you see and what you hear. The blind are seeing, the deaf are hearing. The good news is being proclaimed to the poor. Those who have been disenfranchised, those who have been left out of society are hearing the message. Just like what you were doing in the river, in the wilderness. Now, John's situation didn't change. John never leaves prison. He never gets delivered from prison. But I can just imagine the moment when John's disciples return to him, heading down or wherever it is to John's cell, and word gets to John via his disciples, the blind are seeing, the deaf are hearing. The good news, John, the good news is being proclaimed to the poor, the outcast. I can imagine that the light in the cell got a little brighter for John. So when they came to get him that last time for execution, he could say as Dietrich Bonhoeffer as he was led to the hanging post, "This is the beginning." Our life and our situations are going to change. We entertain these questions of doubt. Are you the one, or should we ask for another? I'm going to be faithful. In Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, Galadriel, one of the chief elves, gives those members of the Fellowship different gifts. The gift she gives Frodo is light from the star of Galadriel. And she tells Frodo to use this when all other lights go out. Now we see in the story later on, as Frodo and Sam get closer to Mordor, he needs to use it. There are going to be situations, and you may be at that point in your life right now where all other lights have gone out. Let Jesus, the light of the world, be your light when all other lights go out. And my friends, all other lights are temporal. All of them. When it is dark and you are struggling to see and seeking for light, look for Christ. Look for Christ. May God bless you and keep you is my prayer.